welcome to another episode of the Meet Musings podcast. That podcast where we raise awareness about disabilities and everyday living issues. Today's episode, we are joined by Dr. Rebecca Troy. It's just been a lot of things that she's had, and she's now joining us to just share her experiences. She helps parents and kids with learning disabilities, and it's just one of those life experiences that need to be shared. So that's why I thought she needs to talk with us today. So welcome, Dr. Rebecca.
Hello, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So it's always better to get the introduction from the horse's mouth. So let's hear from you, really.
Yeah, you got it. I'm Dr. Rebecca Troy, as you mentioned, and I'm the owner and founder of a company called Retrain the Dyslexic Brain. And what we do is we help children with dyslexia to reorganize how their brain is hearing and responding to language so that they can read and spell successfully and confidently within a few months.
I really love what you do, because now in the world we have so many children who have learning disabilities, and I'm sure your services actually help them in several ways. But before you got into that space, what was it that actually made you go into the profession?
Yeah, that's a great question. So dyslexia is highly heritable, anywhere between 50 to 84%. And so I actually come from a family of mostly dyslexic people. So my parents, my brother, aunts and uncles, my grandparents. And so I was kind of one of the only people who didn't have it in my family. And so I knew that there was a great likelihood that my own children would have dyslexia. And I got to see firsthand what those struggles really looked like. So, for example, my brother is a brilliant person, has incredible creativity, incredible spatial thinking. I mean, I think back to some of the little things that he used to make in our backyard as a kid. And he struggled mightily through school because his reading and his spelling were lagging behind. And so I think, there's so many of those emotional consequences that can go along with it, whether it's you don't feel very good about yourself or you don't have a lot of confidence. And so, he was able to kind of push through that, but still to this day, I mean, I think if you were to ask him honestly how comfortable he feels with reading and writing, he'd tell you, I still don't. So it's always been a passion area for me. I was a classroom teacher for 20 years, and I worked at the high school level where a lot of the kids were presumed to have already known how to read. And the majority of my class did not still know how to read. And so I think that there's a number of issues that go along with that, right? One of those being that the educational system that we have to support kids with reading and learning is maybe not the best. And it's kind of leaving a lot of kids behind in the lurch without support. But I knew at that point that I wanted to do something about this because it affected my family personally. And I had all these students that didn't have the support. And it just so happened that when I went into graduate school, I was put under the direction of one of the first people to do imaging studies for dyslexia. So she was one of the first people to put on the map that you can actually reorganize what the brain looks like through the power of neuroplasticity. And so I think, all of those things were serendipitous that, of course, this fell into my lap. And of course, it was something I was super passionate about anyways. So here I am.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, I understand the passion from your personal experience and from having relatives that have dyslexia. Dyslexia is one of those areas that people really don't want to talk about so much, because for some people, you see them and you don't know that they have dyslexia. They can't read, they can't write. I mean, some can, it affects them in different ways. Can you explain briefly what goes on behind the brain of a dyslexic person, And I mean, you're talking about neuroplasticity as well. What does that mean really in plain terms,
Yep, absolutely. So I think it's important to acknowledge that most people with dyslexia have average or above average intelligence. These are highly bright people who have enhanced creativity, enhanced spatial thinking, lateral thinking, interpersonal skills. So there's a lot of gifts that come along with this, but there's this unexpected delay when it comes to language. And so you could see this person who has a lot of confidence and this amazing vocabulary, and to speak with them, you're like, wow, you have so many things to say. But then when you ask them themselves to read something or to write something, it's very obvious that there is a huge disconnect between the intelligence and their present level of performance in reading and spelling. And that's actually how you get a diagnosis. And so you would go to a testing facility and they would look at your IQ relative to your language skills. And if there is a big discrepancy, that's how you get diagnosed. So there are, without getting super technical, there's a couple of areas in the brain that just don't light up when you are doing a language task. So one of those is in the visual area and one of those is in this auditory area. And so if we look at a brain scan of a person with dyslexia and a person without, you'll notice that when you ask them to spell, there's entire areas of their brain that are not activating. And so I think it's important to know that the brain is dynamic and it can change over time, and you can absolutely create neurons and pathways where there weren't any before. But just to know that a person with dyslexia has incredible gifts and incredible strength at the same time that they have these unexpected delays.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I suppose, your explanation justifies why some kids with dyslexia will struggle in school. Teachers would not understand why they struggle to read. And some of the kids, you think, wow, this kid is just not trying to avoid classwork, but it's just because they cannot actually read or write, or maybe they would try to write, but they can't read, but they understand what you're talking about. And that intelligence level is what they try to overcompensate with the reading. They could say, oh yeah, I'm smart, just give me the thing, I'll just explain it. But there are ways now that teachers could actually simplify things for kids in school as well. Yeah, I've heard about this app that is being used in schools these days that just simplifies the reading, and instead of the kid actually reading for 5 hours, that app simplifies, this is what you are supposed to learn, and it does it in 2 hours, and that the kid understands what you're talking about. So this is where your neuroplasticity comes in as well, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, to your point, awareness, whether it's on the part of a parent or a teacher or anybody else about what is actually going on, is huge, because it is true that a lot of kids get mislabeled as lazy or not trying very hard because it appears like, like you're this intelligent person, and when you go to do these things, like you're avoiding it, or you might be, trying to get up and walk away, or, maybe even acting out or having some behavior to try to not be embarrassed in front of your peers. And so I think that awareness is important. And there can be then obviously accommodations and modifications, whether it's apps or reducing homework or supporting some of those things, so that you are less overwhelmed in general and you're not maybe taxed with as many of the emotional pieces that come along with it. But it is important to know that you can actually rewire and reorganize how the brain is functioning. So it's a little bit of that support at the same time as you're going back to the root cause and supporting the change there.
Oh yeah, it would be amazing to be able to just rewire every brain that you think it's not wired correctly. Take that back. Everywhere, every brain is wired in a different way. So you could just rewire the brain to tune it in whichever way or whichever direction it needs to go, really. Because I was discussing with somebody yesterday, and I said I had to rewire my brain at some point to do particular things. When I go to a shop, the only item I want to pick is red. So I had to reprogram my brain to not pick red when I go to a shop now. So I try to pick other things other than red, even though the red is like jumping at me. So that's one of the things that we are talking about. But are there things that teachers and parents can do to help and to support kids that have dyslexia tackle it in a better way?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say awareness is number one. So, I think there have been many studies where they've surveyed different people, whether it's parents or teachers, and asked them, like, what do you believe dyslexia is? And there was a really famous study done called the Connecticut Longitudinal Study. But basically, they went into a school and they said, how many kids here have dyslexia? And the principal reported, not very many, like maybe 2 to 3, maybe up to 5%. And so they said, great, we're going to test every kid in this building. And it turned out that 25 to 30% of the kids actually had it. And so what was clear in that study and others is that they just didn't know what to look for. And so what they thought dyslexia was, or how it presents itself, is not actually representative. So I think being aware of the signs and the symptoms and the traits is important, because then you can have that window into early support. I can't tell you how many of our clients have been told before, like, oh, your kid will just grow out of it. This is going to get better. This is no big deal. Everything will change once they get to 9 or 10. And that's simply not true. Like, you're not going to grow out of dyslexia without explicit support. But if you had this level of awareness, you could actually properly advise a child or a family to get the support that they need.
That's true. Yeah, with the right support. And first of all, this, as you said, awareness needs to be there, that there a kid has dyslexia, and then there's the support from friends, from family, from even the teachers, or the community. Everybody needs to be able to support. Thank you. Can you share some of your success stories so far?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, gosh, we just had a client call this morning where, it's like 50 to 60 moms who are on there celebrating things that have happened. And it's anything from, oh my goodness, my child is up 5 to 6 reading levels. And we've been working for years and years doing tutoring, and we've made minimal to any progress. And we've seen more progress in the last 3 to 4 months than we have in the last several years. I think one really cool story that happened just recently, there was a young man who didn't realize that he loved the theater. And as, of course, you can imagine, if you're going to be in the theater, it requires you to learn and read and memorize lines. And so once he actually developed the capacity to read, he tried out for a play and he got the lead role and he got to open up for and so just the massive shift in not only skill, but identity and belief in who he was and his capacity. I mean, like, it completely shifted his life. And, I could give you story after story that's like that. Like, once you develop the capacity to actually shift your skills in reading and spelling, the world opens up to you in a totally different way. So I think, something that we're super proud of is that our average client makes 50 percentile points of growth in 4 months.
That's amazing. 50% in 4 months.
4 months.
Wow, that's really...
And it comes from actually going back to those root causes. So it's not putting a Band-Aid on it. It's actually going back to help the brain to process language. And once you do that, it is completely life-changing to see what happens as a result.
Oh, thank you. And now, at what stage do you actually recommend that parents get worried about a kid that has dyslexia? Because now you've talked about this young man, you've said about you have a kid that made 50% progress in 4 months. But at what stage can parents start getting worried when a kid is not making any progress at all? Not
That's a great question.
They're working with you, but before coming to you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, dyslexia is highly heritable, meaning that if you have somebody in your family that already has it, even as a toddler, you can start looking for signs of those things in your own child. So whether that, they're late to learn their alphabet, or they struggle to rhyme different words. You know how little kids will sometimes play games like, oh, what rhymes with hot, bot, tot, mot. So the ability to do that is almost absent for a kid with dyslexia. They might be late to speak. They might have other difficulties with language or remembering tasks, or definitely the spelling piece once that starts happening. But the minute that you start to notice those things, even in like a 2, 3, 4-year-old, and you know that you have a history of it, it's a wonderful time to start getting very curious and start doing some screening and get information on whether or not that is actually what your child is dealing with. Because when you are 7 years old, there's this thing that happens that's called, the realization of your self-concept. And that's when you realize that you're different from other people around you. So it can be really nice if you already know that that's what you're dealing with and you get really serious about making a change for your child before that point, because then they never even know that that was something that they struggled with. And I think the longer that kids have to stay in suffering, where they are told that they're not good enough, or they're sent out of the classroom to go to the special group, or they're made to feel like they're not good enough, the more that happens, the more that it erodes their possibility and their confidence and all of those things. So I think most people would say early intervention is best. And so you just continue looking for the signs and symptoms and the traits early on so that you can intervene as early as possible.
Thank you for that. And now, talking about the signs and the symptoms that you look out for, can you give us some of them, please?
Yes. Absolutely. So as I mentioned, when you're a toddler, it might be some of those things like I'm struggling to learn the alphabet, or I'm learning to read and maybe we have the word cat on the page. And I work really, really hard to figure out that this is k and and we feel like we've had a giant celebration. Great, we've got it. And then 2 lines later, I get to the same word and it's like I've never seen it before. And so it's super frustrating for the kid. It's frustrating for the parent. It's frustrating for the teacher. Like, man, it's like amnesia every single day. We're doing it over and over again. And it's like, we didn't get it. So maybe we felt like we had a breakthrough on Monday and we get to the same word cat on Tuesday. And it's like, we just never saw that before. So that's really common. Also, when trying to spell, it's very common to have letters that are added, letters that are omitted, entire syllables that are omitted. And again, it comes from the brain's inability to see and hear and connect those two things together. So if I can't do that, then I'm inconsistent. Like I might take in a letter, but my brain doesn't really know what to do with it. So it might flip it around. It might not include it at all. It might put it backwards. It might struggle, period, with learning at all those letters. And so I think all of those signs are things that would tell us this language is not developing typically. And so again, the more that time passes, the more you start to see that gap between the child's intelligence and then the skill that just doesn't seem to want to grow.
Thank you. That's so brilliant. I mean, the signs are there, and once you recognize the signs, maybe it's the reading, maybe it's the writing, maybe it's just processing tasks. Just try and get some help. And now, is there something that parents of children or teachers or anyone who has dyslexia, who is actually in contact with dyslexic children, need to be doing differently? Because their brain is wired differently. We understand that. So what could we do better to help?
So I think there are a number of things that you can use that are free tools that will help you to not only know the signs and symptoms. So we have a ton of videos on YouTube that'll kind of walk you through at every age. Okay, here's a toddler. Here's what you're looking for. Here are the signs and symptoms. Here's a checklist, at an early elementary. But then also to have access to a screener. And so we do have dyslexia screeners that are available that will just kind of take you through, this is what typical development is for your child's age. And is there something that's off? Because a lot of times parents second guess that. And so again, if the goal is to get you support and get you that explicit instruction as quickly as we can, again, that awareness of really what is it and how do I know for sure is going to really help you along that path. But then it's just making sure that instruction is there and it's consistent and it's repetitive, and we've got the capacity for science to really drive this thing. Because I think for so long, a lot of kids have been able to just pick up reading, but they're neurotypical. And so as a person with dyslexia, you don't just pick up reading. You have to have explicit support to get your brain to actually be reading and spelling. And so I think that piece is really critical for people to understand.
Oh, thank you so much. And that really helped. I hope we'll be able to just say, okay, with this episode, we are just trying to get listeners to get some practical tips for turning challenging situations with dyslexia to something that they can actually deal with on an everyday basis. And you've talked about your worksheet to diagnose the dyslexia. Are you going to be able to give us the link as well?
Yes, absolutely. So I'll share with you all of those links so that parents and family members can really dig into that. The only other thing that I'll say is that I think it's equally important to flourish or grow those bright areas. So I think it's important that we go to the area that might be an issue and that we actually give some good quality support. But at the same time, we have to recognize that these kids are brilliant. They have superpowers, super gifts. And so if you know that your kiddo has amazing spatial thinking, maybe they're great for a robotics team, or maybe you might want to buy them a Lego set, or, think about ways that you could help them to grow and feel more confident in these things that they're amazing at the same time that we support them in being able to live into that greatness.
Oh, thank you so much. I can see your passion for the children that you help, and even for the parents. Because that's one thing, to be able to see that you love what you do, and I can tell from
Thank you.
Yeah, I can tell.
I do.
Yeah, you enjoy it. It's one thing to have a job; it's another thing to love what you do. But you are passionate about it, and the way you speak about it. So, thank you so much for doing your bit to help. But also the last bit is, where can anyone connect with you if they want to connect with you?
The website is drrebeccatroy.com, and on that site you'll have the ability to connect to the screener. You'll have the ability to connect to a free 45-minute webinar. At the bottom of the page there's links to all of our social media accounts where we're talking all about this all of the time. And so there's free videos, and as I was mentioning, those, not only the how to notice this stuff on YouTube, but we have hundreds and hundreds of success stories. And so if you are someone who knows that your child is dealing with this and you need some inspiration to know what's possible, there have been so many of our moms and dads and grandparents too who have willingly shared their child's story of, okay, this is where we were before and this is where we are now. And I think it's just really hopeful and it's very inspirational. So if you need that, I would highly recommend that you go there too. But all of that can be found on the drrebeccatroy.com.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Rebecca. It's been so amazing having you, and I really love the effort that you've put in, so thank you so much. So we'll be sharing this podcast on our podcast platforms, on YouTube sometimes, and then on Apple, Spotify, and all podcast platforms. So please subscribe and share with your friends and family. And thank you so much. It's been amazing again.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Brilliant. Thank you.